there is something really suspicious going on with this hospital bombing. And we're going to break down just what each side is saying and what the truth is, or at least what I believe is really going on. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. This is your daily Israel-Hamas conflict breakdown. Plus, we've got Iran making some pretty scary statements and a U.S. embassy potentially under siege. Let's get into it. Okay, looking at the update map, what I thought was most noteworthy is you can see in the West Bank here, there's a large number of attacks that have taken place, some of which appear to be shootings directed at civilians, but about an equal number appear to be armed clashes between security forces, police or military. Some of them are vague. They just say armed clashes at a checkpoint. But when you see these kind of attacks, it does look like a more coordinated effort among Hamas fighters looking to try to, and this is a very common military strategy, to do what is called fixing, or more likely in this case, diverting, right? Israel has a fixed amount of security forces, and the idea is that by launching even small-scale attacks in places like the West Bank, Israel will have to allocate more of its limited security forces to patrolling and securing these areas. That will leave less available for the invasion of Gaza. A very, very tried and true military strategy, something that if you've been following me on my Ukraine daily updates, you know is an absolute staple, especially of Russian forces when they conduct defensive operations. But that's not the real significant topic we want to talk about. Obviously, Israeli airstrikes continuing, just absolutely blanketing northern Gaza here. Just an absolute ton. But here's what I wanted you guys to take a look at. And this is what I thought was the thing that should make you the most curious, is that you can see, for example, in an Israeli airstrike, 14 Palestinians killed and wounded in a home in a neighborhood. You could see some unspecified numbers where they're not even releasing totals. But you're looking at something in the vicinity of, per strike, you're talking about measuring in the dozens, right? That's a typical casualty level for an airstrike within the town of Gaza. Here we go. Another one, 15 civilians killed, right? This is, I want to put this out there because it helps us scale what we are looking at. And I wanted to show you, there's no people in here, so YouTube, don't demonetize me. This is just the aftermath of this attack on this hospital, coming to us from Twitter. Again, there's nothing graphic here. I just want to do a little post-blast analysis with you guys. First off, you can see here the strike did indeed appear to hit the parking lot of the hospital. And one of the things that Israel came out and said was that they said, no, this wasn't one of our warplanes. Instead, this was a failed rocket attack by, I think it's the Islamic Jihad organization, so a sort of competitor political party to Hamas. But what I thought was noteworthy is that, first, you look at this, you can't even really tell for sure where it looks like the actual rocket hit right about here, but you can see that literally if you were in a car like 15 feet away, you'd probably get your bell rung, right? You'd probably be concussed, but you wouldn't actually be killed, right? You'd be injured. And you could see that though all these cars, some of them caught fire and burned down quite a bit, the buildings around this hospital are almost entirely intact. I mean, look, the rocket struck here, and this building doesn't even appear to have its windows blown out. This looks completely intact. And the reason I point this out is because this is not the explosion you would expect to see from an Israeli warplane. We've looked at videos like this on my site, Combat Vet News, right? I can't really show combat footage of any kind on YouTube. Their terms of service are really strict. So when I want to do deep dive analysis like this into actual combat footage, it's on Combat Vet News. I have a members only area. It's the best way to support the channel and what I do. So you can just like become a member and you'll get access to literally 2 years worth of combat footage analysis for the Ukraine conflict, plus a bunch of, now we're adding in Israel-Palestine videos. We'll be dropping one actually tomorrow, taking a look at probably some of the viral footage coming out of this conflict. But if you were on that, you know that we looked at some of the Israeli warplane strikes, and they are dropping some serious ordnance. These are not precision strikes. These are not like artillery rounds that, a direct hit might take out a Humvee or an MRAP. These are the Israeli military is dropping like JDAMs. They are dropping building destroying weapons. And again, that's if it's on a military target, there's nothing wrong with it. That's how wars are prosecuted. But you can see here, whatever was dropped on this didn't even produce a meaningful crater. You could you could tow these cars and basically this tiling in the parking lot is intact, which says to me two things. First, it says that makes me think that this is probably an attack from a rocket, right? Because if you look at the various homemade rockets that are fired from Gaza, they generally have warheads that have less than 10 kilograms of explosive. And that is because, of course, they're doing it themselves. You can't have a big rocket site. You can't have one of those like Russian-style thermobaric rocket launchers that are towed in the back of a truck, right? You just can't get away with it. So they've got to have more compact rocket systems. So generally, you're looking at about 10 kilograms of TNT equivalent. And that's what you'd expect to see from something like this, right? A JDAM is like a 500-pound bomb, right? 50 times the size. But the fact that, look, the AC units are intact on this building. The cover of the parking lot is fine. There's just none of these. Look, the shingles haven't even been knocked off of the porch here. This is pretty clearly a smaller level of explosives, something more in line with a rocket attack. But then here's the other question that we're stuck with, right? If we know that when Israel does drop their heavy duty ordnance, you're looking at 15, 20 people who are KIA. How were 300 killed in this? Right? I mean, look, just ask yourself, how could you even get 300 people into this parking lot? That itself is a challenge. I mean, you can see here's like, this looks like about 30, maybe 50 people. You would literally have to jam them into this area here to get them to incur a tenth of the casualties that Hamas says this airstrike did. Again, I'm telling you this as someone who was in a combat zone, right? I've been on the other side of explosives, of IEDs, of homemade explosive weapons. Never homemade rockets. The Taliban, that wasn't their MO, right? They buried them in the roads. But this is not a 500 casualty weapon. It's just not. This is 2, 3, maybe 10 if somebody got really unlucky, if there were people in all of these cars, or if there were people gathered around like mulling about, you'd maybe see like 20. But where would you even fit 500 people? So it makes me think that there is a lot of just blatant lying by Hamas and the Palestinian government. And we'll talk a little bit here in a sec about what incentive they have exactly to create this narrative, right? Again, yesterday's video, I called Israel out, right? That they have a mandate to distinguish between civilian and military targets. That failure to do so is itself a war crime. So I'm not some shill here, but I strongly, based on all of my experience in combat, struggle to see how 500 civilians could even fit into this area, let alone become casualties. I think that number is made up or exaggerated. It may be like 500, maybe perhaps the total of everyone who was pronounced dead at the hospital since the invasion started, and they just sort of lumped it together. They may have just pulled the number out of thin air due to poor record keeping and in the chaos of war. It's hard to verify any numbers. But I think it's if this is true, it's kind of revolting by Hamas, and especially given that they went and had a press conference like with the bodies and body bags in front of it. Just the if you know a soldier, you know that there's a special hatred in our heart for people that use war as spectacle, as a backdrop, as a feel-good, electoral way to win elections. It's just filthy. It's just a filthy thing to do. But here's what I wanted to talk about. Right. This is a statement from an official Iranian, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Right. So this is as close. This is an official statement by Iranian. So you can see it's translated from Persian by Google. So grain of salt, but Google's pretty good. The tweet reads, after the terrible crime of the, I think I'll get demonetized if I actually call them this, the Israeli government, in the bombing and massacre of more than 1,000 guys, innocent women and children in the hospital. Okay. So, right. He's not saying, I would believe definitely that there are 1,000 injured or killed, but 1,000 innocent women and children, it's tough to verify. And I don't really think that's insane. Again, you saw that you couldn't fit 1,000 women and children in there if you tried. The time has come, the Iranian foreign minister says, for the global unity of humanity against this fake regime, more hated than ISIS and its killing machine. Time is over. Okay, that is an extremely aggressive statement. Again, it's tough to know, right? Iran is given to bombastic statements about a lot of these things, right? But it doesn't necessarily. But it's not good. It's not the direction that the U.S. wants Iran to go. Another escalatory move, you also have the Egyptian government coming out and saying that it is they will not be accepting Palestinian residents, right? Another classic move by the Arab world, right? Who obviously is outraged by this conflict, but not actually outraged enough to do anything. Bear in mind that, while this crossing here from Egypt into Gaza is controlled on the Gazan side by Hamas, it's controlled on the other side by Egypt. And Egypt has been extremely unwilling to allow refugees into the Sinai. And they said, of course, the idea of displacing Palestinians to the Sinai inherently, the Egyptian president says, inherently means that that it's going to drag Egypt into the war. So it's clear that when push comes to shove, the Egyptians aren't really going to bat very much for the Palestinians themselves. Jordan canceling a major summit with President Biden, which is, of course, a pretty big FU to the United States when there's a scheduled state visit, and the Jordanians simply say no thanks. So it is a bad sign to me that so many major players in the region are increasingly anti-US, they've always been anti-Israel, but they are increasingly bellicose in their rhetoric. So again, we're sort of hoping cooler heads prevail here. Obviously, the ground invasion of Gaza has yet to happen, and so that's at least some reason for optimism. But it may be as much to do with military preparations by the Israelis as any kind of diplomatic work going on behind the scenes. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.